Well, hey there, everyone. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights live show. I'm Katie, joined by Chris and John. Howdy, fellas.
Hello.
Oh, double wave today from John.
This is it. This
Big
is really
day.
compared. Hooray.
Today we are talking about solving data problems with generative AI. We talk about this a lot internally because the questions that I always have for Chris usually result in it doesn't do that. It doesn't do that. That's not how it works. And John, I know you've run into this as well. And so there's a lot of questions that we get also from our audience around what can I do with generative AI in terms of my data? Can it, you know, clean up my Excel spreadsheet? Can it analyze my data? And so today we're going to take this episode to cover what you can do and how to do it. So Chris, where would you like to start with solving data problems?
Let's start with a question you got at your most recent webinar that you just gave not too long ago. And it was this question that came in. It actually came in after the bell. So just as folks were hanging up, this question came in. And so no one got a chance to tackle it. And the question is exactly on screen. It was during the reference I think you were talking about the 6 different use case categories for generative AI, and you were recapping them. Now, this person asked, how about Excel spreadsheets? Do you have any suggestions as to how, for instance, to humanize a list of URLs to display a summary or title aside the actual URL?
And so my question, what I would have asked for clarification is, what do you mean by humanize a list of URLs? I assume, given their additional context, is that it's basically to extract information from the URL in terms of what is the title of the page, what is a quick summary of the page based on what you can glean from that URL. Is that what this person is asking?
I think so. Now, the one that helped, make this a little bit more clear is there was we don't really understand what this person was trying to do.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you probably would have come up with it at the very least, ask them for a user story.
Oh, absolutely. I would have said, well, what is it? What is the question you're trying to answer? What is the problem you're trying to solve? Can you rephrase this question as a user story? And so, one example of that could be, as a marketing manager, I want to use generative AI to extract the web page titles and summaries using a list of URLs. And that to me is like, okay, I understand what you're trying to do. The category of use case is extraction, or it could be extraction and summarization.
Exactly. So this goes along 2 different lines of AI. So let's dig into how you might solve this. So just for giggles, Katie, how would you tackle this if you were left to your own devices? How would you go about doing this? Let's say I have a list of URLs like this. Beautiful, lovely. Use your list of URLs.
I like how this is the giggles portion of the show because everybody knows that I'm going to get the answer wrong. So let's all play along with. Today, I'm going to play the role of person who is not an expert in generative AI. Let's say that that's what I'm doing. So what I would probably do, Chris, is first I would start with opening an instance of generative AI, probably either a ChatGPT or an Anthropic Claude. Looks like we'll use ChatGPT for today. And so I would put in my prompt and I would say, you construct them way faster than I do, but this is sort of on the fly. Like, today I am playing the role of a marketing manager. My task is or my action is that I need to take this list of URLs and find out what the web page names are in a quick summary of what the content is on the web page. For context, this is going to be used to make, decisions about who to hire. And then could you put the title, the web page title and summary in a downloadable Word doc? something along those lines. And so that, and then I would attach the file. So that is how I would approach it. Now, is this going to work? I have no idea. So I bet we're going to find out. That's the fun part. That's the giggles.
We're live without a net. Here we go.
But I think this is a really important thing to do, and the way you're tackling it is exactly right, which is you're asking, can you even do this? Right? This is because it may turn out the ChatGPT says, yes, absolutely, we can do this. Let's go and do it. So of course, the first thing it's going to do is import the spreadsheet. We'll make sure that it actually contains URLs, which is good. It says to proceed with retrieving the page titles and summaries for each URL. Oh, now use a browser tool to visit each tool, extract the information, and compile it to a new document. This process will be done in batches to ensure manageability and access. So there's the thing. So it's going to go out here and search. I've started the processing. Here's the summary of the first 3 URLs from your list.
Wow. I am really impressed with myself. Going to do a little pat on the back that I didn't totally blow up the system. But and I think that one of the things, at least this is helpful to me, is that it's all just sort of, a prompt engineering and using generative AI and asking for tasks is just a series of logic. And so making sure that you're closing the loop on everything that you're asking it and giving it proper context and information, which is why the race framework is so useful. And if you're looking for a copy of that, you can get it at trustinsights.ai/prompt sheet, where we give you the race framework and instructions on how to use that when you're using generative AI.
Exactly. So now let's just quickly open up the first 10 URLs on that spreadsheet, which are 5 best answers to a public alternative for topic research, what is social media publishing for Agorapulse, headless SEO explained, enterprise SEO metrics and how to report your success, search engine ranking versus SEMrush. You will note that ChatGPT has completely hallucinated the answer. So
I was so close.
So your approach was correct. Asking the tool to do what you wanted to do was correct. However, it made it up. It's completely made this thing up.
Didn't it say it was getting the URLs though, even?
That's what it said.
Okay.
In some ways, I feel like this is a really good example, because my concern with the approach, that I took is that somebody would see that and go, oh, that's really easy. Let me do that. Copy, paste. Great. Here you go. Goodbye. And because the alternative is, and I've been in this role before, is that you're given a list of URLs and asked to manually copy and paste, all this information from each individual page. And then, in this sense, you're like, oh, great, work's already done. Boom, bang, no QA. And I think that that's such a really important part of anything you're asking of generative AI, is that you have to build in time to actually double check the work. It's like an unsupervised toddler. If you're not double checking to make sure that they're not sticking their fingers in the light socket, they're totally going to do it.
Exactly. So we have run into what is a pretty severe limitation here, which is that it has hallucinated all of the URLs on this list. So for context, I didn't tell where this came from. This comes from our content curation tool. So we have a piece of software we wrote, and this is last week's content. And you can see these are all articles that are relevant and the kinds of things that we'd want to be sharing, and stuff, enterprise SEO metrics and so on and so forth. So a really good list of content. However, ChatGPT could not actually process that list.
It looks like it's pulling all pages from our own website. Correct. Instead of the external sources.
Correct.
All right.
Because
okay, go ahead.
What it did was it looked at the domain and basically inferred from its own knowledge base, oh, this is about Trust Insights, so here's a bunch of Trust Insights content.
It's probably going, please, please, please don't check my work. Just think I'm really smart.
Exactly. And this, because the way our content curation system works, this list of URLs, these are all redirects. Like these are all redirects that go to other places, but we have it going through our system so that we can track clicks on it to see which content gets the most interest, which we measure in Google Analytics. However, ChatGPT clearly could not handle that.
Okay, so in this instance, Katie won, ChatGPT 0, because my
Correct.
approach was correct and the system got it wrong. That
Exactly.
said, the overall result is incorrect, so it really is still on me to fix it. So what I would probably do next is I would probably, look at all of those URLs, pull the original URL, put those into a spreadsheet and try again.
Yep, you could do that. Having done this and tried this, it will then hallucinate additional things because
Oh, good.
because the nature of this task, and this is a really important clarification. Even though we're using a language model and we're dealing with words,
Mhm.
this task is not a language task. This task is not generation or summarization of language or extraction of language. This task is extraction of data, non-language data. So it's making HTTP calls from the HTTP protocol to another server and then waiting for the server response back, right? So which is code. It is not language. And therefore, this task using just ChatGPT by itself or any of the models is going to fail almost every time.
So to go back to the question that was being asked of how can I take the URLs from an Excel spreadsheet to humanize them, the answer is you can't.
You can't do it directly in a language model. That's correct.
Interesting. Does that surprise you, John?
Yeah, the other thing that I was thinking about is, and I think I've seen this, it make the same mistakes, is if you gave it a more technical description, as far as go to these pages, grab the H1 tag and grab the title tag and throw those in a spreadsheet. But this is what I was joking about this morning. This was one of the first things that I was doing with AI models, was trying to get it to kind of go out and scrape and do stuff. And Chris was like, yeah, no, it doesn't. This is not the thing you're looking for.
Oh, and I think
Exactly.
we're all making that mistake. It's still a really hard, at least for me, it's still really hard to wrap my head around. Chris, you talk about it. It's a language task, what that means, and how you really define those. So, all right, what can we do? How would we approach answering this question? Obviously, we're missing some steps.
We're missing some steps, and what we're missing is we need to use the power of a language model to generate language, but we need to generate in a language that can address the domain of the task, which in this case means writing code, because a service like ChatGPT, in addition to writing English and French and Swahili and Danish, can write code. And in fact, something like 70% of the usage of a tool like ChatGPT is to write code, because it turns out that writing code is something it's really good at.
Mm.
In most languages, but the language it is the strongest in by a long shot is Python. So just as ChatGPT can't count or do math, because those are math operations, not language operations, ChatGPT can't go surf the web, but ChatGPT can write the code to surf the web.
Okay. What does that look like? Oh boy.
So let's go ahead and start a new session here. Today, we're going to write some Python code. The code will be in Python 3, which you should install on your machine if you don't have it already, because you can't run this inside ChatGPT. And we'll use popular Python libraries like requests and beautiful soup to crawl a list of URLs. From that list of URLs, we want to extract the HTML page title and perform some extractive summarization of the top 1 to 2 sentences from paragraph tags on the page. Probably using some kind of natural language processing package like Spacey. From there, we will take the URL, the page title, and the 1 to 2 sentence summary, and write that to a CSV file as the output. Now, this is a lot of very specific stuff, and there is some domain knowledge required here in terms of knowing what Python can and can't do. If you don't know that, you can ask ChatGPT, I want to do this. How would I do this in Python? It will walk you through lengthy explanations.
What if you didn't know that it was even Python that you needed to do it in? Could you say, here's the task I need to accomplish. How do I do that? Would it start by saying, well, first of all, you need to write some code in Python. And then you would say, okay, can you do that? And it would say, sure, why not?
Exactly. And ChatGPT, if you don't specify, ChatGPT's native language is Python. If you don't specify what programming language you want, it will default to Python. Okay.
Go ahead. I think the interesting thing here is that, we're all starting with feeling like we have to know the exact thing to give it to do, when really what you're saying is it's okay to ask the system, what do I do?
The chat part of ChatGPT is the part people forget about.
Crazy.
So this ending sentence here is probably one of the most important things you can throw in any of your prompts ever when it's a task-based thing is, what questions do you have? Because if you don't, it will try to execute based on what it thinks its best interpretation is, and it won't actually think through the process. And we want it to think through the process.
So basically, it's like a human. It just kind of wants to get to the point.
Right. It's behaving like you're a really smart software development intern. And so part of working with it is this part, which is the part that all of us in software development hate, which is requirements gathering.
Yeah, all right, so let's start I'm seeing here. It has, it's listing out the components and asking clarifying questions, which, wow, how great is that? Well, and it looks like you still have to have some domain expertise because, the question, do you already have a list of URLs? I would have said yes, and then moved on to the next thing. So access and rate limits. Again, it feels like to complete a task like this, you definitely need to have technical expertise. Even your original prompt about, the construction of the page, where exactly you wanted to pull from, you had to have some understanding of how web pages are constructed in order to give it the direction to say, pull the data from here.
That's right.
Now, John, would you have approached completing this task similar to me, or would you have gone the Chris Penn route?
Yeah, no, it's great. I sit right in the middle. Like, I would go more technical, but I wouldn't actually get it to work. Like I would have to go install Python, and I'd be missing some libraries, and and like there's no way I would know that Spacey needs to be the medium English variant. Like, these are all like I get the concepts of all of it, but yeah, it would take me like 4 extra hours than Chris is hammering through.
I like how you literally and figuratively sit between myself and Chris.
We are today.
But I think that that's really, an important thing to point out is that you may have people on your team who have a bit more technical understanding. You're just not utilizing those people. And so it's a really good opportunity as you get deeper into using generative AI for tasks like this to really do an audit of your skill sets to see who knows what. I think, John, you are definitely one of the more technical people that I've come across that isn't a data scientist or a technician, but you have a really good grasp of how technology works and how to approach it. And so it's one of those underutilized skill sets on our team.
I'm always like, I really need to practice my Python more. I'm like, I could do so much more if I was just better with Python. And of course, never make the time for it.
Right.
The
So
good
Chris,
news is these days you don't have to be. You just have to
Right.
know enough to be able to correct errors.
This is why it keeps turning up the heat on me. I'm like, okay, now I really need to install.
so Chris, you went ahead and answered all of the outstanding questions. Did you I didn't see the end of your prompt. Did you say, do you still have more questions or is this enough?
I just gave it the answers, and
Okay.
it ran off from that.
Gotcha. I suppose you could probably get into, a very long loop if you keep saying, "Do you have more questions?"
Yes, you can, and you can, because it understands you're trying to do software requirements gathering. You can go down some pretty deep rat holes, like what about concurrency? What about failover and clustering? It's like no. I'm just trying to process a spreadsheet here, bud.
Just run once, yeah.
Exactly.
But
So
depending on the software, that's actually not a bad thing, and that could be a really useful tool for business analysts and project managers who are struggling to get deeper requirements from their developers.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fantastic way it's really a fantastic way to do requirements gathering for anything. So people who are project managers, having a project therapy session with ChatGPT is an incredible way to get good feedback. To have it, you should ask it, what have I forgotten? What are the things that I should have asked you?
Mhm. I definitely could have used this tool about a decade ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay, how are we doing here? So it has created a Python script outline, and it has identified the Python libraries. It has written some functions to summarize text, to extract info, and the main function that will execute it. And then it has this here. So let's go ahead and we're going to take this. We're going to copy that. We're going to go over to our coding environment. We're going to paste it in. So let's just read through it real quick. So summarize text. It's going to use the NLP function from Spacey. Extract info. It's going to look for the paragraph tags. Going to look for the title tags. And it has some error handling. So if it can't do it, it'll just keep going. It has the input of the CSV file and an output file, which is good. It tells it to load the correct model in Spacey, which is a language processing library. And then it says, here's the URLs that we're going to work with. Okay, so let's make sure that we have our URLs on our desktop, which we do. And let's give this an actual try and see what happens. See if it completely blows up or if it actually works the first time out of the box. I'm guessing it's going to blow up.
Oh, the anticipation.
Unrecognized arguments. Awesome. So that's the path to the CSV file. And I know that for sure that file is there and on the desktop. So what do we do? Just give up? We're done?
No.
It would make for a very short episode if we did.
It would.
Thank you.
It would. So let's do two things. Okay. First, can you write out our requirements in bullet point format like this? So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to have it spit out the requirements. And there's a very good reason for this. Well, there's two very good reasons. One, we want to essentially have it refresh its memory as to what it is it's supposed to be doing. And by having it restate its requirements, it brings all of this text back to the front of its memory to say, okay, this is what you're supposed to be doing. This in itself is one of those handy little tricks to use to keep it on the rails. I'm going to copy this, and here's trick number 2. I'm actually going to put the requirements into the code itself. And again, the reason for this is pretty simple. I want to ensure that every time I give it its own code back to it, it includes a copy of the requirements, so that as it's making changes, it remembers what it's supposed to be doing. It doesn't go off chasing its own tail, which can happen an awful lot. Okay, so let's take. Okay, here is the error I got. I'm going to go to our command line prompt here. We're just going to copy and paste this whole thing. And here is my code. We're going to go into our coding environment. We're going to grab all of our stuff, paste it in. Please resolve the error. And so in doing so, again, this is why we want those requirements in there, because we want to remind it, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And if it's not clear, now's the time to fix it. It says
go ahead.
It says here's what is happening and why it's happening.
So when we first started this task, we gave it a list of URLs and we said, complete this, what should be very simple task. And it hallucinated every single answer. How do we know it's not doing the same thing now? I mean, you're building in, you're going back and forth with it, but how do we know you're not just getting hallucination after hallucination and you're never going to get to the answer?
You don't know that. However, because you're forcing it to write code, which is a language task, rather than try to do the task itself, it is less likely it's going to do that, because there's a difference between English or a human language and a programming language. And the difference is the programming languages are much less ambiguous. If something is wrong, as we saw here, it just doesn't run. It returns errors, and the errors come back in a standard format. And this tool, because it's vacuumed up so much code across the entire internet, is much more fluent at fixing coding errors than it is talking to a human being and trying to say, what did you even mean? What does that mean?
Yeah, the great thing is, so like, this has read all of Stack Exchange. Like, developers immediately cry out in joy knowing that this is all here.
Exactly. Well, enjoy, and to some degree suffering as well, because
get bad solutions as part of the mix.
And the thing is, like, we're doing this, right? None of us are professional coders. And so the question is, well, what do you need professional coders for? If as long as you have enough knowledge to operate ChatGPT and ask it these questions. Katie, I see you're making faces there.
I am making faces. That is a heavy question that I know, we could debate all day long. I do think you need subject matter experts in order to cut down on the back and forth. People who actually understand, Python code. This may be more efficient at writing it, but it doesn't mean that it's more correct. And so if you have someone who doesn't understand how to write code in Python, let's say you gave this task to me, Chris. I could be here for like 4 days trying to get it to work, whereas someone like you or someone who actually understands how to code in Python might take more like 40 minutes. And so I feel like the blanket statement, you don't need professional coders on your team if you have this, is a dangerous statement that should come with heavy disclaimers. Like, yeah, I could do this. It's going to take a heck of a lot of time, and it's going to cost the company a lot more money than just hiring someone who knows what they're doing.
Exactly. However, as you can see, if you do know what you're doing, this dramatically speeds up the process of writing this code, because I'm a terrible Python coder. I'm better in R than I am in Python. And we're 30 minutes into this live stream now, and we now have working code. It would have taken me 30 minutes just to have framed out this on my own, because I constantly been having to look up, okay, how do I do this, or how to do this? And even in cases in R, there's just a lot of manual labor of rewriting this stuff, where if I have a tool that instead can generate the 98% of the code that's needed, and I can tweak the last 2%. I'm much more efficient.
Oh, sure. But the difference between you and me is you know how to write code, even if you call yourself, a novice or sort of, not the best coder, you still know how to write code. I don't know how to write code. I know enough to look for certain things, but if you hand me Python code and say, "What's wrong with this?" I would probably throw up in my mouth a little bit and then say, "I have no idea."
So our code ran.
Yes.
Let's see what we got here. So there's our URLs. Let's see. Here's the page titles. Already, we're in much better shape. Those are the actual pages because we did that quick test. And let's take a look at the summaries. And the summaries are, they're not great.
Mhm.
They are using the spacey extractive summarization technique, but it kind of sucks. But it did the job. It did it. This is like the mythological genie, right? From old Middle Eastern tales. It does what you ask it to do. Even if what you ask it to is a really bad idea, it will do it. And so in this case, I gave it a focus of doing extractive summarization, which is where you try and find the most relevant piece of text in the body of text. For what we're doing, that is the wrong choice. We should be doing abstractive summarization, which would call an API like ChatGPT's API, say, read this entire page, and then you write a net new summary of the page. The reason I chose extractive was mainly for time, because the abstractive takes a bit longer. But in this case, it did what it was told, and it did a very good job of it.
Yep, halfway through that statement, you lost me, and I think but I say that, and I don't part of it is, the self-deprecation, but part of it is really to demonstrate that, you know, there's a lot of marketers more like me who are, being asked to do tasks like this, which on the surface looks really straightforward, like, read these URLs and tell me what these pages are about, but it's so much more complex than that, and so this is where I can see a lot of teams are gonna struggle of, is generative AI really the answer, or could I have already gotten halfway through this task myself doing it manually? And they do that because they don't have the technical skill set to learn how to make generative AI work for them when they're trying to solve these data problems.
Exactly. And that goes back to really good requirements gathering, right? It goes back to what we call the 5 Ps, because if this is a one-time task and you're never going to do it again, in the last 30 minutes, yeah, you probably could just browse those web pages and done it yourself, right? If it's a one-time task.
Mhm.
If it's not a one-time task, if it's going to be asked to do this every month, every couple of weeks, every week, yeah, you absolutely should be looking at, okay, well, then maybe we do need to use generative AI for this. And to what Gwen just said in the comments there, knowing the different type of abstraction is something that, why a coder should be involved, right?
Mhm.
She said, being able to make icing for cake, ingredients for cake doesn't mean you can make the cake. That's absolutely true.
This is true. Um, no, and so I wholeheartedly agree, and Gwen's really just reiterating, the point is that there is a learning curve with generative AI. And so depending on the task you're trying to do, first you need to do your basic requirements, and then you need to figure out, do I need a subject matter expertise? And so in this case, yes, I would need a subject matter expert, and I would, Chris, look to you or someone with your similar skill set and say, this is the thing I'm trying to do. Can you help me put this together in generative AI so that I can do it on a repeated basis, because the information and the skill sets that I have today aren't enough in order to complete that task using generative AI.
Exactly. One of the things that we say about generative AI, the 6 major use cases: generation, extraction, summarization, rewriting, classification, and question answering, which, by the way, if you want to learn more about this, you can take our course on the topic. There's a big asterisk that isn't on this slide, which is what we just talked about the last 35 minutes. It has to be a language task. It has to be a language task that you're using these tools for. If you're doing you're trying to have it do tasks that are not language tasks, none of these categories matter. So yes, we are technically doing a form of extraction, extracting data from an HTML page. But the process of doing so is not a language task, because it's not interpreting the language of HTML and trying to pull it out. That is a code-based task, and that is not what generative AI does. And that's why we had to write code to be able to do this. And once we were able to write the code, which again, we got this done in under 30 minutes, then it was able to fulfill the task as we asked it to.
I'm going to throw this out there, and this is maybe something you and I can debate on a podcast, but I did, a very quick and dirty internet search, and the internet considers math to be a language. And I think that's why people like me get confused all the time when you say it's a language task. I'm like, but math is a language. So what do you mean by a language task? And, this is definitely, we could go down a rabbit hole with this, but I think that's where I personally get confused of, what do you mean generative AI can't do this? I have a data problem I need to solve, and it's going to involve math, and math is a language.
Yes, mathematics, particularly equations, are a language, but computation is not a language. And so, yeah, we can definitely talk about that on a future podcast episode, because it is an interesting distinction. It's one of the reasons why, for example, generative AI thus far has deeply struggled, very, very unsuccessfully, to do things like compose music. Music is a language. There's absolutely a musical language and structure. Generative AI, because the underlying nature of the mathematics that powers it, can't really do that well. It can do it, but it's not great. For my personal newsletter last week, I had it create a pop melody, and I handed it to an actual musician. She's like, "This sucks. Like, dude, this really sucks. A 7th grader would do a better job than your machine did." She's like, "Will someone, could someone put a song out with this? Yes. Would it do well on the charts? Maybe, maybe not." But she says, like, the musical equivalent of a dentist drill. No one wants to listen to this. And again, that's because there are complexities in the construction of music that are not language, that are psychology, that are neurology, that are physics, that are not reflected in the language that appears on a sheet of music. Just like there's complexities to mathematics that are not reflected in a series of equations, whereas those complexities don't necessarily exist to the same level in the written word or in a programming language.
Mm-hmm. So if we go back to the original question about using Excel, because where we started the episode of how do I solve my data problems using generative AI, I think a lot of marketers are trying to do things like this. Would we have been better off asking ChatGPT or whatever generative AI tool is, here's my question, can you do this? Or what is the best way to approach it? That may have saved us some time.
You absolutely can. You absolutely can do that. And that wouldn't be a bad place to start, is to say, like, what approach would you use to solve this problem? Because again, use the chat portion of ChatGPT.
What do you think, John? Are you going to start chatting with ChatGPT more?
Yeah, I go have it churn on my buggy code and let me run afoul of what else I can break.
Yep. Gwyn said, huge takeaway is chat with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I forget to do that as well. I feel like systems like ChatGPT and Anthropic Claude give a lot of us less technical folks so much anxiety that we kind of feel like we have to have the answers going in. So we forget about the chat component of when it says, "What can I help you with today?" It literally means, "What can I help you with today?" It didn't say, "What exact directions do you have for me today?" It's really trying to be a helpful system and guide you through. So I have some, ideas I'm gonna play around um, with ChatGPT and even with Katie GPT and sort of stretch and see where, her knowledge, extends to at this point.
Exactly. And as these models continue to advance, they will get better at anticipating needs.
Mhm.
OpenAI has said in press briefings that they expect to release GPT-5 this year. Um, Regardless of all the hype and speculation, what we do know is it'll probably have fresher knowledge. It'll have a better conversational abilities. It'll have better understanding of language and more capabilities for things like vision, etc. But fundamentally, what it's really good at is that conversational AI. So you will need less and less really tricky prompting strategies to get good results. It may take you longer and be less efficient than someone who knows, the underlying structure of the model and how it navigates latent space. Their prompts may be more efficient and faster, but you will both get to the same destination.
I do not understand latent space and all the vortexes and, whatnot that you just talked about. So I will be the least efficient probably on the team for a while as I'm trying to figure out, but I am going to challenge myself to use the chat function more. So, as all of us collectively are, we're looking at chat GPT or generative AI in general to help us solve our data problems. It sounds like really the first place to start is ask the system, can you do this? Or how do you do this?
Yep. How would you do
Um,
this?
and Gwen has one final question that uh, I'm going to punt to you. I may have missed it, but is this the same case for Copilot? So, Chris, can you first set the stage with what is Copilot and then?
Well, okay, so this is slightly tricky because there's a bunch of different tools that are named Copilot. There's GitHub Copilot, there is Microsoft Copilot, there's Bing Copilot and stuff. Copilot is really Microsoft's main brand. All of the Copilot services that Microsoft operates use the GPT-4 model underlying them. So if you go to Microsoft Bing and use the generative AI there, you're using GPT-4 through Bing. If you're using it Office Copilot in Microsoft Office, that is using Microsoft Knowledge Graph combined with GPT-4. So because it has access to the same model, you can ask it the same question. So if you're using Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Word, yes, underneath it is GPT-4. And so you can ask it the same questions like, hey, I have this Excel spreadsheet. What's your recommendation for how to convert this into a 10-slide PowerPoint presentation? Or what's your recommendation for analyzing it to understand the trends in it? And it will tell you like, hey, here's some things that you can think of and try. Be sure to give it time to run. So one of the weird quirks of language models, at least today's transformers-based language models, is that the longer and more verbose they can be, the better the results are, because there's a very technical explanation, but it basically boils down to it needs time to think. It needs room to foam at the mouth until it dials into the correct answer. And the more you can do, the better. So if you ask more open-ended questions of it, it will tend to perform better. If you ask it, show your work step by step, or let's talk through this step by step, or what do you think about this? Give me your analysis before you give me the answer. Right? These are all strategies for getting it to talk more, and as a result, to dial into the answer faster.
You know what's funny, Chris, is the same tactic works on people.
I know. People are just squishy versions of ChatGPT.
John, any final thoughts?
I can't beat that one today. I got to play the card. Winner.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and we will talk to you all next time. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and a weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.